it is frustrating at times when that kind of tired old narrative that no one reads the Bible anymore is out there in the media, and folks just like to kind of perpetuate it
Yep.
over and over again. I sort of feel like it's just become kind of a commonplace presumption that isn't actually true.
Correct.
And it's not that everybody reads the Bible. It's not that there are a lot of people that don't read the Bible, but it's still the most read book, the most engaged book, the most purchased book of all books, and not just in human history, but currently. And so any kind of narrative that casts it aside and says, well, it's irrelevant, less used, nobody pays attention, is just disconnected from reality. I mean, we've mentioned the number of people that installed the app, but people actually use it. I mean, we've seen people read a total of, I think current total is about 239 billion chapters of text in the Bible app.
Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, the companies, and the small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I get to sit down with an incredible entrepreneur, a community leader, a business owner, an activist, author, speaker, or just an incredible person who is trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you, the listener, that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact. My guest this week is Bobby Gruenewald, and he is the founder of the YouVersion Bible App, the #1 installed Bible app in the world. He also serves as pastor and innovation leader at Life.Church. As one of the leading voices in the church on innovation and the use of technology, Gruenewald has been featured in the New York Times, TechCrunch, CNN, and so many more. Prior to joining the Life.Church team in 2001, he started and sold 2 technology companies, as well as served in advisory capacities for various startups and venture capital funds. Gruenewald and his wife, Melissa, live in Edmond, Oklahoma, with their 4 kids. I was so honored to have Bobby on the show. To have the opportunity to sit down with the creator of an app that I use every single day, multiple times a day, including my kids use the Kids Bible app, to just be able to sit down with him and hear the story behind, bringing the Bible to the digital age, and how what he did at the time was such a unique and innovative thing. And it was just absolutely fascinating and such a great conversation. I know that you are going to absolutely love it. But before I get to my conversation with Bobby, I want to thank our partner of the show, and that is Mama Suds. Let me tell you, if you've been a listener of this show for any amount of time, you know how much I love Mama Suds products. I use in our home their multi-purpose cleaner, their Castile soap, their toilet bombs, their laundry soap. But I just recently tried out their new non-toxic stain stick, and I have a personal testimonial to tell you how good it is. Here in North Carolina, we have that red, muddy clay. Our soil is that red clay. And if anyone has ever grown up in a state where the dirt where you live is that red clay, you know that it stains. That clay stains. Well, the other day, my sweet 6-year-old son was being a 6-year-old boy, and he was playing outside, and he got that red clay all over his brand new shirt that he had worn one other time. And I had a moment of a panic of, oh my goodness, the shirt is ruined. It's absolutely ruined. So I brought it inside. I immediately pre-treated it with the Mama Suds stain stick because I remembered that I had just bought it. And let me tell you, the shirt came out cleaner than when I bought it brand new. I was amazed. So I'm just telling you, as a mother to a young children whose kids get their clothes real dirty, you need a Mama Suds stain stick. So head on over to mamasuds.com. Use the code Molly for 15% off your order. That's mamasuds.com. Use the code Molly for 15% off. And now, without further ado, on to my conversation with Bobby Gruenewald. I'm so excited to have the one, the only Bobby Gruenewald on the show. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, it's good to be here with you, Molly.
I'm just kind of, it's fun to put a face to a name and an app that I have used every day for the past, 12 to 13 years. And, obviously the YouVersion Bible app is arguably the most used app on my phone. And for so many people out there, millions and millions, I feel like that's millions and millions of people out there have, same is that's their story too. And to get to meet the person, kind of the face behind the, obviously we could get real spiritual and be like, well, it's the Lord's. Yes, we know that. We all understand that it's God's word.
We don't try to use my face though. That's the thing we've tried to avoid is using the face. But I'm tracking with you. No, thank you for the kind words. It's definitely something we're honored to do and be a part of. And you're right. It's something that we know that God's done, but I recognize the fact that he's used a lot of pretty cool people on our team to do it. So we're honored to do it. Yeah.
Well, let's dive right in and have us give us the Bobby 101. So who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So my name is Bobby Gruenewald. I'm the founder and CEO of YouVersion. I'm also a pastor and innovation leader at Life.Church. Some people may not know this, but the YouVersion Bible App is actually a ministry of our church. So it's a part of what we do as a church. And so I have responsibilities that kind of span the church as a whole. But my focus and what I spend, my time on is really stewarding YouVersion and what we do, with the Bible app. So my background is a pretty eclectic background. Without getting in great detail, I started as a Christian rapper when I was in high school, and
shocking! I did not know this.
For 5 years, and God led me into a business entrepreneurial track that I wasn't expecting to be an entrepreneur, but I had a degree in finance, and through a series of one opportunity, I should say, that turned into multiple opportunities, I became an entrepreneur in the tech space in the late 1990s. So I had 2 companies that I started and sold. And the last one I sold in December of 1999. I thought that must be what God designed me to do because I'd had some early success in it. Instead, he made it clear that he wanted to lead me into a role on staff at Life.Church. And that was about 22 years ago that I came on staff. And if you had asked me at that time, I would have maybe given it 22 months, just because I wasn't sure, if it would be the type of thing that I'd be in for a long period of time. Up to that point in my life, I'd never done anything more than like 22 months. And so I thought that maybe it wouldn't last. But instead, God had been preparing me for this unique role in ministry where almost like an entrepreneur in residence, I kind of get to take some of the ways I think and the ideas and approaches to how I solve problems and just apply those to the mission of the church and to ministry. And so we've been on this journey for quite a while now. And through that, God's done way more than we ever thought was possible, including the growth of the church itself, as well as what we've seen him do through the YouVersion Bible app. So that's the kind of the quick version. I'm married and I have 4 kids. My wife and I have been married almost 26 years, and my oldest daughter is 16, and I have a son that's 14 and a daughter that's 10 and a son that's 9. And that's my family.
Wow. Okay. So off the bat, you dropping the information that you were a Christian rapper for 5 years was like not on my Bobby Gruenewald bingo card, but I love it so much. The fact that you're like, that's what I started out as. And then I got into the tech space, which is every tech person's story, I feel. So
they started as rappers.
They all started as rappers. Come on. I mean, didn't you know exactly that Mark Zuckerberg was actually like a freestyle rapper, in 8 Mile? I think he was an extra in the movie. I'm just kidding. Okay. So I have to ask, like, when you were a kid, and you obviously had this passion for rapping and you were obviously in the church. Did you have an entrepreneurial spirit? Did you have a tech spirit? Like, was this something that was remotely on your radar?
I mean, you could see it in retrospect, but not in the moment. So the way I became a rapper is kind of interesting in that I was in the church. I grew up in the church, but wasn't a believer until just between my 8th and 9th grade year. And it was a radical transformation for me, like in terms of who I was and what I did to who I became. And I wanted to reach my friends and share my faith with my friends, but I knew none of them would listen to me. But they all liked rap music. So I just thought maybe I should write a rap song. That was just kind of how I thought about solving the problem. And I'd never written a rap song before. I'd never tried rapping. I'd never, there's no history of it. So I wrote a rap song and it kind of resonated and it worked. And people said, man, I want you to perform that song here, perform it there. Then it just turned into kind of a whole thing where we ran around the country and had a whole, like albums of rap songs and concerts. And I mean, like 15 people traveled with us. It turned into this big thing that we did all during high school. And I guess looking back on it, all of the things that are required to have a band and to be on the road and merch and all the stuff, there's so many aspects to it they're very entrepreneurial. And even the whole path to get into it was trying to solve a problem that I didn't know how to solve. So I came up with like a creative way to solve it, which is pretty much what entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the language of being an entrepreneur, partly because my parents are amazing, but my dad was kind of at the same job for 35 or 40 years. He's sort of a career oriented, person that was just in the same, like stayed with the same job. There wasn't anything about the world around me that modeled being an entrepreneur. So I never really thought about it as like a career path. I just kind of thought, you go to college and get like a job, like a regular job.
Right.
But again, that's kind of the way God works. I was, working at a car dealership in college, a back office job that was really boring, getting paid $6 an hour. And it was like date money back in college. And I was so bored that I would listen in on conversations I had no business listening in on. And the owner of the dealership was getting pitched by a group from California to build a website for the dealership. And this is in 1995. And that was way early in the days of the internet. So I walked up to the owner afterwards and just said, if you'll let me build a website for you, I'll do it for $100. And he was like, sure. Because I mean, he had nothing to lose, to have me do this. But the problem was I had absolutely no idea how to build a website. There's no books on building websites in 1995 or even websites about how to build websites.
Yep.
So that turned into a website that they liked. And then I suggested we build a website selling car parts and accessories because I thought they would actually sell stuff if they could, do something besides just cars. And that turned into a website called HondaParts.com. And they were selling hundreds of thousands of dollars in car parts and accessories through this website every month. And he called me into his office, and he was a Christian business guy. And he called me in his office and said, whatever it is that you are going to do, I want to invest in it. And that was the moment that I kind of realized I had this opportunity to become an entrepreneur. And it was kind of a crazy thing because I had an investor before I actually had an idea. And that was how I became an entrepreneur. He became my first investor, and we started a web hosting company. And then the rest is history. We sold that company and started another one. And he made a pretty good amount of money through that process, and I did as well. But it was just one of those things that I did not know that God had that plan for me. He kind of pivoted me off of what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the whole entire story of my life, though. It seems like everything I think is going to happen isn't what happens. God does something different.
I think that's the story of all of our lives. What an incredible story. And I love how you recognize those threads now, and how at the time, how you referred to it, you didn't have the language for it at the time, but that you saw a need, and that need was, I want to talk about the gospel. I want to talk about my faith with my friends. And so I'm going to need to meet them where they are. I'm going to need to speak their language. They like rap music, so I'm going to talk about rap, And it's funny because I did not grow up a Christian, and I think I've told this story, or partially this story, maybe one time on the show. But I didn't really grow up a Christian, but I could sing, and my best friend in middle school was a Christian. And she was starting this Christian worship band called Doubting Thomas. And so she invited me to be the lead singer of this Christian worship band called Doubting Thomas, even though I wasn't a Christian. And this was like peak 90s worship music. I mean, we're talking,
Al Denson.
Yeah. We're talking like, we sang Sanctuary and Around, like yep. Lord, prepare me. And then, Heart of Worship, all of it. Anyway, it was good times. But I think about how that was one of the things she was doing to begin to plant those seeds of faith and of truth in my life, and how now, like, I help to lead worship at my church now, and just all the different, threads. And I love seeing threads. I mean, maybe that's the creative in me. That's where I see those things throughout life. So I know this about you because we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, how you're originally from Illinois and you ended up in Oklahoma. What brought you from Illinois to Oklahoma?
Well, my wife and I met in the 4th grade.
Oh my gosh, so cute.
We dated off and on in high school. She was a year ahead of me in school. So when she graduated, I kind of thought that we were both planning to go to a university that's up near Chicago. And instead, that summer, she broke up with me and said, hey, I've decided I'm going to Oklahoma to college. Well, she didn't want to have a long distance relationship and, all of that stuff. So I was a little bit hurt by all that, but I found out a couple of weeks later that she was dating another guy in Oklahoma that had been kind of trying to get her to come, down to that university in Oklahoma. So the short version of that story is my wife chased after another guy to Oklahoma and I chased after her. So that's actually how I ended up down there. I was determined, that I was going to win her over. So that's what brought me.
And who won? That would be you. You win. Yeah. I love it. Okay. So let's pick it up where you are working at Life.Church. And I believe the YouVersion Bible app was launched in 2008. Am I correct?
The App Store launched in 2008 and the app was in the store that day. We did have a website for YouVersion before it was an app. That was in 2007.
Yeah.
But 2008 was when the app launched, and because that's when the App Store began.
That's right. Okay. So talk us through how this all came about. I mean, obviously, I remember I had the very first iteration of the iPhone, and I remember this whole concept of apps. And it's funny how when I was a kid, or not even really a kid, probably like late high school, early college. And I remember being like, wouldn't it be cool if someday you could have internet access like on a phone? Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could be in your car and you could be on instant messenger, even though not driving, obviously not driving. And I just always thought that was just the wildest idea. And then, of course, like watching Austin Powers movies, like when Austin would talk to Basil on the video screen, and I was like, video chatting, that would be really cool. And here we go. Like, now look at all these things that we can do, and here you and I are basically Austin Powers and Basil. Exactly like that.
Yes.
So, I remember when the first iPhone came out. I remember when apps came out, and it's this whole new thing. Obviously, in your mind at the time, you're working at a church, people want access to the Bible. How can we make Bible access more accessible? Talk us through that process of the kind of the birth of what we now know as the Bible app.
Sure. So, I'm an idea guy, so I have lots of ideas, but we obviously have to filter those ideas because there's too many of them to do. But I was in the O'Hare Airport in Chicago in 2006. So it was October of 2006. And I was in one of those long TSA security lines that just wrap around forever before TSA pre-check or any of the things that let you speed up, the line. And normally I'd be frustrated, but for whatever reason that day, I was just asking myself, kind of in my mind, just kind of thinking, I wonder if there's a way to kind of leverage technology to help me read the Bible more consistently. It started with a problem that I had, which was that even though I was on staff at a church, embarrassingly was not consistent, like in how I read the Bible, but wanted to be more consistent. So the idea for YouVersion just came there in the security line that day. And I'm an activator, so I came up with the name YouVersion between the security line and the gate that day, registered the domain name before I got on the airplane. And we were, had no idea what was going to be involved in building a website. But the original idea was for, as I mentioned earlier, was for a website. It was pre-apps and pre-smartphones in 2006, at least the types of phones that we have today. So fast forward, later in 2007, we felt like this is something to explore and do, but had no idea all the obstacles we'd face, but kind of worked through those obstacles, had to get licensing for the Bible text, lots of things that we just didn't know. I was completely ignorant going into it. But we did launch this website in September of 2007. And we had a lot of people that came to it. We had, I think, a big conference that promoted it. And so we had, I think, almost 20,000 people in the first few months that came and visited the website, which we thought was a great, start. But they weren't coming back. Like they'd go check it out and didn't come back to use it. And then we were using it, but we were kind of forcing ourselves to use it. It wasn't a natural thing. It was just because we spent all this energy building it. So we're like trying to use it and be engaged with it every day. So it just honestly just didn't work. And we're not afraid to try things and admit that they fail, because that's sort of part of the whole process is to fail at times. You're going to do that, but we always want to learn when we fail. So December of 2007, just a few months after we launched the website, we realized this isn't working and it's not going to work. And we put a lot of energy into it, but we decided to shut it down. And before we shut it down, we wanted to process like, why did it fail? What did we learn from it, et cetera? And realized that one of the factors was just that this website we're accessing back then, even in 2007, computers were not like portable. It was still like a desktop, that sat like at your office. I mean, the concept of a laptop was pretty rare. Not everybody had laptops and, and certainly not tablets and all of that. So we thought, I think part of the problem is we didn't really change much about the Bible. We made it digital, and you could do some kind of new things with it, but you still had to be like in a certain location at a certain time to be able to access it. Not any different than like your nightstand if you had a physical Bible, by your bed. And we thought if you could have it with us all the time, kind of on a device we were carrying with us, that might actually make a difference. And at that time, the iPhone had just come out, but you couldn't install apps on it. It was, most people may not remember, but the original iPhone at the very beginning came with some apps, but you couldn't like create your own. There's no app store. Blackberries were the dominant smartphone back then. And
that rollerball, man, that rollerball.
Yes. I mean, it was something. I mean, they're crackberries. People use them all the time and addicted to them for email and texting. And so we thought, well, what if we redesigned the website so that it would display on a BlackBerry? So we did that in early 2008, just as kind of another test. And it was profound how just that one change made a huge difference in how we engaged with the Bible and how other people that were coming to the website are using their BlackBerries to engage with it. So we just thought, we kind of try to move fast, follow momentum. And we saw the momentum of that right around the time that Steve Jobs then announced that they were going to make something called an app store, and you were going to be able to develop apps. That was in like spring of 2008. I don't remember the exact day or month, but when he announced that, we were sitting there looking at this going, man, we've got this momentum from BlackBerries. I wonder if we could build a Bible app and have that, submitted to this app store. So again, had no idea how to do that. I'm not a developer. I don't write code. We had a 19-year-old on our team that loved Apple. And that was about the only two requirements you had to have back then to build an app, was to be 19 and love Apple. And he, as a kind of a part-time project, he and I worked together, and we worked to try to build this app. And again, it's brand new. There's no apps. There's no sense about like how it's supposed to work and what it's supposed to do. But we tried and submitted it to Apple in June of 2008, and the App Store launched in July of 2008. And it was a Thursday. And on that day when it launched, we were surprised, but we were in the first 200 free apps that were available the very first day, that the App Store launched. And there are only 200. I mean, today there are millions of apps available. And back then, though, all the eyeballs of iPhones at that time were focused on one place at one time. And there's only 200 options, to choose from. So we saw 83,000 people install it in the first 3 days, like from Thursday till Sunday. And it blew our minds. Like we just had absolutely no idea that was possible. And we could tell from the data that they were using it. They were actually opening the app multiple times and engaging with it. So pretty much at that point, we realized that we had a tiger by the tail and wanted to push any kind of resources we could into it. That 19-year-old, that became like his full-time job on Monday, and we came back to work. And it's been this journey for, I guess, the last almost 14 years that we've been on, of this crazy story that God's had us on, with a huge coalition of partners and obviously lots of languages and versions and all the other features and stuff that have come that we have today.
Wow. Wow. That is just such a cool story of you're standing in line in the security line at O'Hare, where let's just say we don't all have the holiest of thoughts in that situation. And here you are developing an app in your mind or a website. I didn't even really know what it looks like. Why the name YouVersion? Where did that come from?
That's a great question that I can't even answer. It was really the best name that I came up with from the security line to the gate that day. I mean, it had obviously a lot of market research that went into it. It was the thinking behind it at the time, not that it really matters today, was the website idea was to allow you to take any kind of media, photos, videos, YouTube, Flickr, whatever you were creating online and associate it with any part of the Bible. And it was a way for you to show how this passage of scripture was connected to something you saw in your life or express it in some way artistically. And so the premise behind it was sort of the version of the Bible that included you, that showed how it related to you. That was the thinking, behind the title. But honestly, because the website didn't work, the title then carried over. And then there's years later, we were going to change it. But the moment we went to start to go change it, we realized that this is like a name that has stuck with a lot of people. So, and it was growing so fast that you're kind of in the mode of like, look, it's working right now, so let's just keep it. And then of course, now it's become more distinctive. But at the time, that's the honest story about how it came about. It was kind of, I would say, is actually, now the funniest thing is when I have people come up to me and tell me that they know where the name came from and they want to explain like what it means. That's always the funniest conversation to me, because they're always like going, I love the YouVersion Bible and how it means. And they start to describe, some scenario that they think what the main name implies or means. And of course, it obviously doesn't, but it means whatever I guess you want it to, but that was not what the intention was.
I'm curious, what is one of the strangest or just funniest explanations that somebody has given you that they believe that the name YouVersion?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I as soon as I said that, I knew you were going to ask me. Now I'm trying to think of what.
I'm putting you on the spot, Bobby.
Well, first of all, a lot of people, when they text me, they spell it with a U instead of a YOU. So I guess they don't look at the app or something because it says it on the screen when it opens.
It's right there. It literally says it right there.
Nonetheless, I get that a lot. By the way, YouVerse was one of the possible names, but when I went to look up the domain name, I was trying to buy all of the names around it. And there's this company called AT&T that had registered this YouVerse, name. And of course, it was before they came out with YouVerse. They just had already registered the name for their, became their television service, I guess, for a while. But, I'm trying to think of, some people think that it has to do with the fact that there's so many versions and you get to pick the one that you like. And that's why it's called YouVersion. Okay. It's not necessarily a funny thing. It's just, I get that a lot from people that think that that's why we named it. It's like, it's because you got 2,700 versions of the Bible and you get to pick the one that you like. That's why it's the YouVersion, the one that you do. And, so it's fine. It's just not what it means. I can see that.
I'm tracking with what that, I'm drinking the juice they're pouring, so to speak. So you start, you launch, you're one of the first 200 apps ever on the App Store. To date, there's how many downloads do you have? I was going to say a number and then I realized that I don't know the actual number. I was going to be like, it's 7 billion, but that's like everybody.
Well, it's actually in the app. And so you can actually most people don't know this, but if you go to the more thing and then click on share YouVersion, you can see like an up-to-date counter. And it's like updated to like the last day, basically. But it's right now it's at 519 million. So probably the next day it'll cross over to 520 million.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And you started off, what did you have in that first iteration? Was it just the NIV and that was it? Or, because obviously today you have 2,700 different translations, which I didn't even know there were that many translations out there. And you have, thousands and thousands of devotional plans and reading plans. And you now have this kind of interactive content with different videos each day. And you have the verse of the day. And, just the amount of resources that you've now included in this is incredible. And so what did that first iteration look like?
Yeah, we, the website, we had the New King James Version, I think the New Century Version, which were two that came from Thomas Nelson, and the rest of them are all like public domain, King James, probably ones you've never heard of.
If it ain't King Jimmy, it ain't the Bible.
Yeah, so that's actually, and by the time that we launched the app of it, I can't remember exactly the number of versions we had when we launched. I should probably be able to go look that up at some point, but I don't believe we had the NIV at that point, and we didn't have most of the versions that you have in English today. It was just a few that started with. I think we did have one Spanish version that was a public domain Spanish version when we launched. So it's, maybe a dozen, dozen different versions. But anyway, it's obviously grown a lot. We have a ton of partners, Bible societies, Bible translation groups like Biblica that are the ones behind the NIV, and several other similar type versions in other languages. But yeah, it's over 20. I think the exact number as of today is 2,724 versions of the Bible. But then it's in 1,830 languages. And so that's really a big emphasis for us. We're trying to make sure that we're providing the Bible in people's heart language. And there's a whole lot of languages that don't even have the Bible translated in it yet. And so we're just committed to put all those up there as soon as we can. And we're working with all the Bible translation groups to do that.
I'll be honest, one of the most fascinating translations, because one day I think I was just kind of tinkering around in the app, and I was, just really interested at some of the ones that are in other languages and other translations and things like that. The one that is the most fascinating to me is Hawaiian Pigeon.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, Hawaiian Pigeon. It is a fascinating. And then I went on this because maybe it's because I was an English major, and I am fascinated by the origin of languages. And I also, in addition to reading the Bible every day, I do my Duolingo. Like, I love learning other languages. I love learning the culture behind languages. And I'd never even heard of Hawaiian Pigeon before. So then I go into this like deep dive on Hawaiian Pigeon, and it was just fascinating to me because it's like this.
Is there a Duolingo for Hawaiian Pigeon?
There is not a Duolingo for Hawaiian Pigeon. Unfortunately, there is not. They do have, I think it's just native Hawaiian but that's right. Like Hawaiian Pigeon's like a whole different subset, and it's just fascinating because there's like some English in there, and so you kind of understand what they're saying, but then it almost, I don't even know how to describe it. So you should, if you have the Bible app, which you should go download it. If you don't, you should look up the Hawaiian Pigeon translation. You'll immediately be like, this is fascinating. And then go down a deep dive.
Yep. And you can compare versions. So you could like pull up the NIV and then go over and find the Hawaiian Pigeon version side by side.
Yeah.
You can do that as well. So yeah, no, that's one that a lot of people like, just because you can read it in English. It's just a different, some different spellings, but it sort of takes you into kind of the dialect or the sound of the words, just the way it's printed. So it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I know that you have sort of talked about over the last couple of years, is the fact that especially during the earliest days of COVID, there was a narrative that was trying to be spread that it was like, the Bible is irrelevant. People don't care about God's word like they did before. And, more and more people are walking away from the church, and more people are walking away from Christianity. Yet you have, as the kids say these days, the receipts that that's not necessarily true. And that's because the Bible reading on the Bible app increased during COVID. So I would love for you to talk about that, because I think that is counter to, let's be honest, like what the narrative was for a while. Yeah.
I think, first of all, it shouldn't be too hard to kind of presume that when everybody gets put in their houses, and doors closed and you're not allowed to go out, which is kind of the environment we were in at the very beginning of COVID.
Right.
that two things are happening at once. One thing that was happening was there was a lot of fear and anxiety and concern, from groups of people, because no one had ever experienced anything like this ever before, in our lives.
Right.
People are concerned about their jobs. People are concerned about, all kinds of things. How am I going to eat? And where's, the grocery store, all those factors. So we saw that immediately show up in what people were searching for, in the Bible app. You could see these words around fear and anxiety pop up on search terms. But the other thing that was happening, in addition to kind of the concern or the fear, not everybody was afraid, but there was definitely a lot of it, going on at that time. The other factor, though, was people were using digital tools in order to connect and access the rest of the world. So they're doing just like you and I are talking on Zoom. All of a sudden, nobody knew what Zoom was. I mean, a few of us did, but that was only because it was sort of a business tool that people would use. But it now is like a household name, because everyone's looking through the lens of the technology they had at that time, whether it be their phones, their computers, their iPads, whatever they had, to be able to connect with the world. So it's not like rocket science to figure out if people are hurting and searching for answers and looking for something and they're using digital tools, that the Bible app is going to be one of those places that they go to look for that. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, we saw this big spike in activity that came almost immediately at the onset of COVID.
Wow.
And it wasn't that no one was using it before that, because we've had really strong usage, for many years. It's not always been up and to the right, every moment of every period in time, but it's grown and continued to grow over the time that we've been stewarding this. And so it is frustrating at times when that kind of tired old narrative that no one reads the Bible anymore is out there in the media, and folks just like to kind of perpetuate it over and over again. I sort of feel like it's just become kind of a commonplace presumption that isn't actually true.
Correct.
And it's not that everybody reads the Bible. It's not that there are a lot of people that don't read the Bible, but it's still the most read book, the most engaged book, the most purchased book of all books, and not just in human history, but currently. And so any kind of narrative that casts it aside and says, well, it's irrelevant, less used, nobody pays attention, is just disconnected from reality. I mean, we've mentioned the number of people that installed the app, but people actually use it. I mean, we've seen people read a total of, I think current total is about 239 billion chapters of text in the Bible app. That's not nothing in terms of Bible engagement. And so I'm always scratching my head when people are kind of acting like it's dead or gone or been trivialized. It's just simply not true. We see a generation of people that are excited about God's word. We see people that technology has been the breakthrough for them, where they've wanted to connect and they've wanted to be engaged consistently. And now for the very first time, they're like, I've finally been able to read the entire Bible.
Yep.
I listen to the entire Bible on my phone in my car when I go to work every day. And that became the way that God used the technology to kind of help me get his word, into my heart, was I listen every day. That became my routine, the rhythm of what I did, or I did it while I work out, or, whatever different rhythm that they had, the technology became the tool that God used to put it in their heart. And we see this over and over again. It's not just a US thing. I mean, the Bible app's used in every single country and territory, including places you couldn't physically bring a Bible into without a fear of harm. And so whether it's North Korea or Iran or Syria or any other part of the world, we see the Bible app being used. And so it's just, we have a lot to be excited about. And I feel like that narrative is one that we're pretty determined to make sure people understand, because I think the more that people realize the Bible is not just a good book, but the source of truth in a world where people are searching for truth, where they're struggling in kind of the context of all of our social media and all the different inputs we have in our lives to try to discern what's real and what's not real.
Yep.
Just because there's it's a challenging environment, to be in right now. It's challenging for my kids, for sure. We're like, look, the Bible was here long before any of these things were here, and it's still here. And we have it in a way that connects with the tools and the devices and the things that you use already in your life. And it can be powerful. It can change, it can provide direction and kind of a rudder to your life when people, are struggling sometimes with kind of aimlessness. And so anyway, we're pumped about what the potential is, the future is, and the present. This isn't just a story of optimism towards the future. It's really, I think, a story that we can say God's up to something, and we have the evidence of it.
Not to mention the fact that you also have an incredible Bible app for kids that is engaging. And my kids, I think I first downloaded it when my now 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old was a toddler. And she would beg to use the Bible for Kids app all the time. And I would have to because I'm one of those parents, I'm like, you will have a phone when you maybe go to college, maybe you might have a phone. So I'm pretty strict on what I let them engage with.
Totally understand. Yep.
And so I would but then it just became a thing where I would be like, if we were in a situation, I was like, all right, I need to, I'm not above or below. I don't know, above. Yeah. I'm not above bribery sometimes with my children. Let's just be honest. God is still working on me. And there were times where I would just be like, all right, if you are patient and wait during this particular thing, I'll be like, you can have some time on the Bible app. And they'd be like, okay. So, but I love that through them using that app, they would come and I told you a little story before, we started recording where my daughter heard my mother-in-law say Baal, and she was talking about Belle, from Beauty and the Beast. And my daughter's first thought at the age of 6 was Baal, the false god. And I was just like, how, in what world is that normal? Which I just thought it was hysterical at the time. But the reality is she's a kid who from a very early age was interested in God's word and reading the Bible. And she knows things that I'm just like, how do you know that? And she knows more than some adults. And it is just fascinating to me because kids are, when you speak their language, when like you said, when you were a rapper, you were meeting your friends where they were. When you meet kids where they are and you engage with them in a way that they can connect with, that is planting seeds that you're going to see incredible fruit of and from for years to come.
Yeah, I know we're really proud of how God's used that app. We designed it because, really young kids, it's a completely different experience that they need to have to engage with scripture than what we have in the Bible app. And so there's a lot of work that went into it. That I know our partners at One Hope are the ministry that we partnered with to do that app. They've been tremendous partners for us, and my kids engage with it. It's interesting in the United States, the target age ended up skewing a lot younger for that app. It's just, I think part of it's just the proficiency around technology that kids have, and some of the literacy rates that we have here. Other parts of the world, it skews a little bit older in terms of the age demographic that connects with it. But you're absolutely right. It's so important for our kids to kind of gain an understanding, and it does it in obviously a very interactive way. It's a completely different experience. So if people haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. Even if you don't have kids that are in that age range, maybe you'll have grandkids one day, or have grandkids, and it'd be great to have it on your device to let them play with it and experience it. It's gamified. It has interactivity. It takes you through kind of the larger meta narrative of the Bible, but it does it kind of story by story, but it pieces it all together.
Yeah, it really does. And it's so well done. Again, it's creative, it's engaging. And what you're doing, just as an encouragement, just from one parent whose kids have actually used it for years, to another, thank you for doing that, because it has, like I said, it's planted seeds that has now, my daughter she just got baptized a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
She had been asking about it for a while, but my husband and I really wanted to make sure that she was ready. And so we wanted her to be able to articulate, why do you want to be baptized? What does baptism mean? Why is it something important? And she was able to do it. So, and we made her, we made her, answer some questions from our pastor before she did it too. We were like, we really put her through the ringer. We were like, no, you're not just going to do this because you think you want to. And our pastor was like, man, she articulated that better than a lot of adults, I think.
And that's awesome.
And so now she's like I said, she's almost 9. So now she's kind of upgraded from the Bible app for kids. And we just got her the Action Bible, which is like the graphic novel Bible. And she's really into graphic novels. And so, that's kind of, but my son who's 6, like he's now kind of stepping into that and stepping out. But again, those seeds are planted, and that is, that's huge. And then just, from an adult perspective, like with the Bible app for me, I mean, like you said, where somebody said to you, for the first time, I've been able to read through the Bible in a year. And that's how I was able to do it for the first time back in 2018 was I found a Bible in a year plan on the Bible app and committed to it. I just started in the Message translation because I felt like that was the easiest, and I listened to it while I read. And but now that created in me a discipline and a habit to where it's just a part of my morning routine. And now this year, what I've done for the first time in, I guess this is 5 years, was I listened to it in the Bible app, but I then read along with my physical Bible and take notes in my physical Bible. So it's like this mash of using technology in addition to like opening up my physical Bible and taking notes in that. And that's been really transformative as well. And so I think that there's so many opportunities to use it in a way that speaks to where people are, because it can feel daunting, this task of like, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to read, you know what I mean? So creating those resources for people is incredible.
Well, that's really encouraging. And we know a lot of people that do just what you described, that use a physical Bible in conjunction with the digital, which is also really common. The other thing I was going to mention for your daughter, as she gets a little bit older, maybe even at the age she's at, but a little bit older, we have an experience in the Bible app called the Kids Bible Experience. And it's a daily video, kind of full immersive thing that just it's short, lasts like 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Again, our partners at One Hope put it together. And I think right now it's in English. I'm not sure how many languages it's in, but it's definitely in English. And so if you scroll down the home screen right now, you'll see it kind of towards the bottom. But a lot of parents are taking their kids through that because it's just fresh content every day. It's designed for that demographic.
That's so cool.
And it's a way for us to kind of on-ramp kids that are in the tween sort of years into a Bible app experience that has content that they know connects with them, as they kind of ramp into it.
That's so cool. And I'm really excited to check it out for myself. And in fact, tonight, I think maybe that can be part of our evening devotional thing where maybe we do that together as a family. So I am curious, and you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. So this is free and there's no ads. You don't pay for the app. I mean, I think there's even been times where I've looked and been like, I'd like to somehow, like maybe there's like a donate, but no, there's no call to action even within the app. And I think I believe that that's done intentionally in just a way where this is a no strings attached. We want to provide this as a way to connect people to God's word. But obviously I know as a small business owner, and I have worked with other businesses on app development, things like that. And just especially when you're dealing with an app that literally hundreds of millions of people have downloaded, this is a massive undertaking. And so how has that mission of it being a ministry of Life.Church changed it all over the years? Like, what does that relationship and partnership work with to keep the main thing and to never, I think you know what I'm getting at, is like to come across like, oh, well, we are doing this because we really want your money. Yeah.
So I think most of what you said is accurate. There's a couple of parts that might be a little bit different, but that's okay though, because I think the intent behind it or what you're perceiving is true.
Yeah.
And that we are non-commercial. We don't have any advertising. We've never had any advertising.
Right. Yeah.
No one's ever paid us to put content in the app or anything, of that nature. From the beginning, we wanted it to be free. We wanted there to be no strings attached. You can use the app. You can use every feature in the app without any obligation to pay or give anything. That being said, we do have a way that you can give.
Oh, you can. Okay.
They're in the about section, or in the more section again on the menu there is a donate
Oh, I see it
button, depending
now.
on which device you have.
Thank you for correcting me.
No problem. No problem. And but it's always, there's always been some path for that, but it's been not something that's obviously heavily promoted. And partly because for many years the church funded it entirely. And then we had some outside donors that came alongside the church and said, could we accelerate the growth of this? So between the church and the outside donors, we had kind of our budget and what we invest in it covered, for it. But what we realized a few years ago was that part of spiritual growth and part of taking people on a journey of growing is building intimacy with God. And one of the pathways to intimacy, besides obviously prayer and worship, Bible engagement, Bible reading, is generosity. And we encouraged our community to take on the cause of Bible translation. And we said, there's a lot of people in the world that don't have the Bible in their heart language. We have no idea what that's like because we've always had the Bible in English. And so we've always heard Jesus's words in our language, even though Jesus's words were not in our language, when they were uttered. We hear Jesus's words in our language because we've grown up reading it, or we've been able to experience it. So we challenged our community to give towards Bible translation to support those ministries that do Bible translation work. And we started doing that a few years back. And when we did, many people gave to that because they were excited to be a part of it. But people also wanted to give to YouVersion to kind of help support it. And it wasn't something we were trying to push or that we really even needed at the time. But that began to grow. And so we actually do have a lot of people that support YouVersion today that are users of the app. And the fact that you don't even know that there's an opportunity to do it indicates how it's not it's obviously not like a Wikipedia thing where we're saying we're going to shut the app down unless people give. But it does actually enable us to go faster and to do more, than what we had planned to do. And so today it's pretty much entirely funded by small donors that give, and then some major donors that sit outside and give towards it, and then what our church supports on top of that in it. So that's kind of the makeup of how it happens. And we're not ashamed of there being an opportunity for people to give, because we really do feel like it actually gets stronger engagement. If somebody gives $50, their level of commitment to it goes up. But we never want that to ever be a barrier to someone reading God's word, which is why your perception is absolutely true, which is I can download the app, I can use the app, I can sign up for an account. It's free. We don't sell data. We don't do any of those things that other people might do, when you see an app and you're like going, hey, I don't understand how they're making money. Well, generally the presumption is, well, they must be selling my data, or they must be doing something, to do that. We don't do any of that and have never done that as well. So it's really just truly something that is a ministry. And as far as the relationship with the church, it's very much a part of our church. It's not a separate thing. Our team are all part of our church. And we think that that's just something unique that God's done that really gives a lot of strength to it. But if you use the app, you'll also notice, just in the same way that you're feeling about the donation thing, you'll notice that the app isn't there to promote our church. Yeah. There's content that you'll see from time to time, but just like there would be from other churches and other groups. But it's not an effort. Even the theology of our church is not narrowly put on top of the app, because we represent the whole church with the app. We have Pentecostals, Catholics, we have a wide range, of folks that use the Bible app. And we've been intentional about saying it's not about us having kind of some specific theology that we're trying to represent, more so represent the whole church. So anyway, I appreciate you kind of asking, or at least highlighting the fact that it's definitely free and non-commercial for sure. But I'm happy to encourage people to give and to be a part of supporting it, because I really do think that it helps them be engaged more. And it's not out of driven by need or any kind of desperation, we've got to have your money or we can't move forward. But I think it's an important thing for people to realize, like, if I'm committed and invested to this, that actually is that's something God can use, to kind of help draw me closer to him. And it does help us go faster. I mean, I would be lying to say that we expanding our budget over the years and even expanding it more rapidly here recently allows us to add more features and do that. But that's not the driver of the why.
Yeah. Well, thank you for correcting me. And I'm kind of like, as somebody who uses this app multiple times a day, the fact that I didn't know it was there, maybe I need to explore the other features of the app more.
No problem.
But no, I'm glad that's, because that was something that at one point I had consciously gone looking for that because I was like, oh, I'd like to, support that. Here I am now feeling really stupid. It's totally fine. Well, I think it's incredible. And also I think it speaks to the leadership of you, and we could go down a whole rabbit hole, which I will not do because I could go off on a digression and a soapbox. But I think it speaks to the humility and the leadership that your church leads with and your team leads with, to not be like, oh, well, we have now this captive audience of 500 plus million people that we're going to be self-promoting. And it reminds me of almost, to me, it almost is a great example of the parable of the talents. And like, you were faithful with little things, and God has entrusted you to be faithful with big things. And you haven't used that as an opportunity to be self-focused, but continuing to be like, how can we make the name of Christ increase, and how can we make ourselves decrease? And I think that is very difficult to do nowadays. And again, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole or a soapbox that my brain is trying to. It's like, nope, Molly, don't do it. So anyway, I think it's wonderful. Before we get to the get to know you round, because obviously I could ask you like 700 more questions. Bobby, what is on the horizon for you? I mean, or for the app? I mean, what's kind of happening? I mean, by the time this airs, we will have 6 months left of 2022, which is bananas to think about.
Yeah. Right now we're aggressively trying to grow our team. So we have about 115 full-time people that work on YouVersion with about 30 open positions. And that's probably going to grow by 2 or 3 or 4 times as large as it is now in the next 3 or 4 years. Is the plan. So I'm trying to find some key leaders that we're looking for the team. That's sort of one of my big focuses right now, is just kind of getting some of those leadership spots filled. And then the vision for the product is substantial from where we are to where we want to go, without kind of revealing too much of it. Not that it's a secret. It's just that I want to be able to deliver on it in a reasonable amount of time, and it might take a little minute to get there. But we really do feel like this tool can be something that can really help people grow spiritually and meet people where they are. Much more personalized experience is what we see for the future. Right now, you're getting a lot of the same app experience that I get here in English in the US. But over time, your experience should be different than mine because you're different than me. And we want that to be more of what we see entered into the app going forward. There's a lot of international focus right now, and just a lot more content that's getting added to the app, including podcasts and longer video format content that we have. We've already added some of it, but there's more and more being added all the time. So there's some of the short-term points of emphasis. I hope that we'll get a lot of that knocked out, or big portions of it, by the end of the year. But it's one of those things where we're moving as fast as we can, and there is a lot of responsibility that comes with it too. Just there's got millions of people that count on it running every day, so you got to make sure that the lights stay on and things keep moving. But anyway, it's great to be a part of it. And on a personal level, I'm just enjoying this season of life, and I'm a pilot, and so I like to fly airplanes.
So awesome.
And so that's my distraction, although I haven't had much of a distraction recently because it only gets me from point A to point B right now, which is, I don't do any flying for fun. It's all practical, but it's still something I enjoy.
I love that. Well, Bobby, this has been absolutely fantastic. But before we go, this is the portion of the show where we just get to ask some fun, get to know you questions to get to know you a little bit more. So, Bobby, are you ready for the get to know you round?
Go for it.
All right. Question number 1 is, what is your current guilty pleasure?
There's these Skinny Cow ice cream bars that have the like, I don't know, it's like a caramel nut layer thing. They're incredible.
Yes.
And so they're really not that bad for you. And the problem is, I go to the store, and if they have them, I literally buy every single box. I look like some crazy person, and I buy the entire. One time, I thought just to throw the algorithm off at Walmart, because they'd like track like the patterns that people buy. I had like 10 of these boxes of those little ice cream bars because I would just have like one in the evening. But they run out and then you don't have them for, weeks or months. So I buy that. And then I bought a shoehorn.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's just going to throw off Walmart's algorithm. They're going to be like, who buys 10 boxes of skinny cow ice cream bars and a shoehorn? Walmart, but nonetheless, that's probably would be my guilty pleasure is like one of those little ice cream bars in the evening.
I actually think your guilty pleasure is throwing off the algorithm at Walmart.
That actually might be more true.
I love it. Okay. What is the best concert you have ever attended?
Oh man, these best questions are too much.
No.
Man, I don't know. I would say it wasn't really a concert, as a conference, but I would say the first sort of Hillsong conference I went to in Australia was probably the best, just because it was just so next level and different than anything that I had been to.
Yeah.
It was a big arena event. That was many years ago. That probably had one of the biggest impacts, on me was that one. So I'm sure I'll think of more as we're talking, but that's awesome.
I love it. That's a great answer. Okay. Inevitably, when the movie is made about your life and somebody has to play you, which actor do you want to play you in the movie about your life?
Oh, I do not know. This is going to be a pass.
Totally fine. Totally fine.
Somebody else could pick that. I'm not going to pick that one.
I love it. No, you're like nobody's going to make a movie about my life. See, I envision like a Lifetime movie with you like chasing your future wife off to Oklahoma. Okay.
Somebody wasting a lot of money.
I love it.
So
okay. Are you a big reader? And if so, what's maybe been kind of a top thing you've read in the last year or so?
So little known thing about me is that I don't read books. I read book covers. So there you go.
All right. Well, is there one in particular that stands out to you?
I say read book covers because normally you can capture the whole essence of the book on the cover, and you don't need to read all the fluff, that's inside. So with the exception of Pastor Craig's books, of course, I would read all of those. But that's a given.
I love it.
These are going to be, it's a strange answer, but a book that kind of framed the way I think about innovation and framed and put words to some of my thinking around it was this book called The Houdini Solution, I think was the name of the book. And it just talked about how Houdini innovates inside of constraints. He was an escape artist.
Wow.
And that many times we think about innovation as something that requires a bunch of resources. Like we need to have a bunch of money so we can be innovative, or we need to build something. And most of the time, in my experience, really innovative thoughts and ideas have come inside of constraints. So it's sort of inside the box thinking, not outside the box thinking, and that you need the constraints. They're like a requirement. The limitation of it is a necessary requirement to come up with a new idea. Because if you had money, if you had time, if you had people, if you had all those things, you would just buy a solution or use a solution that you could acquire. But when you don't have all that, you got to come up with a new idea and come up with a new way. And so that book sort of framed the thinking around that. It's a long time ago, but that was probably an influential book in my life.
That is fascinating. I just wrote it down.
I've never read it. I just read the cover.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm going to read it for you and I'll report back.
Great.
Because I love to read. So I will definitely do that. Okay. And then my last question, and this is the question I ask all of my guests, and that is, Bobby, what does it mean to you to run a business with purpose?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's others-centric. Some people interpret purpose differently, but for me, purpose is always about serving others. And that's no matter what it was that I did when I was in business, it was definitely, I was less concerned about making money. I ended up making money because that's obviously what happens when you're successful at running a business, or at least it tends to happen. But it was like the problem I'm solving, the people I'm helping, the things I'm trying to, the people I'm trying to help accomplish something new. And then with what we do today, I mean, it did start with me trying to figure out how we solve a problem of me reading the Bible more consistently, but quickly realized a lot of other people carry the same challenge. And so I think running a business with purpose is being others centric, or servant leadership. That would be another way to describe it.
Bobby, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule to share your heart with us. And to, I'm just fascinated to learn all the things that go on behind the scenes of this thing, like I said, that I use every day. And I know so many other millions of people do as well. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Molly. I appreciate it. It's fun to be with you.
I told you that Bobby was awesome. I loved this conversation. It was, again, one of my favorites, and just getting to sit down with somebody who I've, kind of looked up to for quite some time was a really, really cool opportunity. Be sure to tune in next week, where my guest is Noelle Jett, and she is of Jet Set Farmhouse fame, and she has a new book that's out, and I'm so excited to sit down with her. So be sure to tune in next week for that episode. But as always, I would love to know what you loved about this particular episode, or if there was something that you learned. If you do, go ahead and let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to use that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. And if you are a first-time listener, welcome. Be sure to visit the archives for past shows featuring incredible people who are changing the world with what they do for a living. And if you're a regular listener of the show, thank you for tuning in and week out. Thank you for your support. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and click that subscribe or follow button to help make sure you never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you take a moment to leave a review? Leaving a review helps me to know what you're liking and how this show is personally impacting you. This show is produced by the incredible team at Third Wheel Media. Thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.